This week's parasha, Bezrat Hashem, we're going to read the Parashat Chukat. The parasha begins with the red heifer, the verse of the Parah Duma is Zot Chukat Torah, very famous verse that opens this parasha, and it literally states that these following psukim, the following topic is the chukah, the grand rule, like the constitution, what constitutes the Torah. So it doesn't say just that now I'm going like Moshe Rabbeinu or HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to us that now I'm going to give you the rule of the red heifer. The rule of the red heifer is called the rule, the grand rule, the constitution of the Torah itself. So there's something about the red heifer that it's the most archetype mitzvah of all of the mitzvot. Now, a lot of the commentaries have noticed this phenomena where only about this mitzvah does the Torah call it the ruling of the whole Torah. Zot chukata Torah, not zot chukata para, not the ruling of this specific mitzvah, the ruling of the whole Torah. So everybody notes this in different interpretations. Now in this week's portion of Mei HaShilach, which we're contemplating on in this year. So he also meditates on this point, and the word he wants to say is he points out that every mitzvah has a core to it. And every mitzvah has obviously, like as we're familiar, every mitzvah has different rulings about it. Every mitzvah is a different practice, but there's a core to all of the mitzvahs. The core of all of the mitzvahs, it correlates with the core of every Jew's, every person's motivation in his service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When one is awakened or has a desire to connect to Hashem, so in our the deepest layers of who we are. So the will to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to connect to our Creator, is a sheer motivation. I mean, it's not that we have a very specific will of what we want or what outcome we want of that. There's a certain yearning, again, a natural, intrinsic yearning to connect to Hashem. That's the core of the motivation that drives each and every one of us in our seeking of a relationship with Hashem, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And also in every mitzvah, that's also the core of the mitzvah. The core of the mitzvah is that it's just sheer will. It's just pure will, Hashem's will. And the red heifer expresses this in the most explicit way, as explained in many commentators, that of all of the mitzvot, the Parah Aduma is the most paradoxical of all of the mitzvot. I mean, it has a lot of contradictory details. Like, for instance, the person what the red heifer is that there's one of the, first of all, it's part of the rulings of purity. So in general, the whole concept of purity in itself is something that's not sensible. It's a paradoxical concept. It doesn't make any logical sense. It's not cleanliness. It's nothing that you can fathom or physically, empirically study. It's the ruling of the Torah that this is purity and this is impurity. So already we're in a category of paradoxical concepts. But within the rules of purity, the most paradoxical rule is the red heifer, because it's how you purify a person from the deepest impurity, which is the impurity of death. I mean, all impurities, the whole entire concept of impurity always evolves around lack of life, or a certain element or type of lack of life. And therefore the core of impurity is death. The person dies and his body becomes impure. The lack of life is the mother of impurity. In order to cleanse oneself or to purify oneself, you need to use the ashes of this red heifer. Now, the way it's practiced, as like we said, all sorts of contradictory details. The most famous one is that the person who conducts the process of purifying someone from his impurity has to be a pure priest. And that priest, in the conduction of this process, becomes impure in himself. So the verse in Chazal is that Parah Aduma mitaheret hatmeim v'metameh et hateorim. So it purifies those who are impure, the person who comes to be purified, and it unpurifies those who are pure. So the priest that needs to do the process, he becomes impure in the process of purifying his fellow friend that came to be purified. Because that's one of the examples, of many examples in the halachot and the details of the Parah Aduma that are contradictory. That again, you're dealing with something very pure, it makes you impure to deal with it, and all such things. So a lot of the commentators note that there's something inherently, again, not just like many mitzvot that we might not understand completely, but in this mitzvah, there are things that are even apparently contradictory. Even Moshe Rabbeinu says, this mitzvah is something that I could not, it's unfathomable to me. Now, this point of unfathomableness is is a reflection of the core that we were discussing. And this is the psychological phenomena that the Ishbitzer notes over here, that on the one hand, all of us have this, like we said, this sheer natural will to connect to Hashem. But what we're trying to connect to, even not only how to connect to Hashem, but even what we're willing for. I mean, the Kadosh Baruch Hu himself is something that's unfathomable, and our yearning to connect to him is really a yearning to connect, to relate to that which is unfathomable. That's what we're yearning to connect to. But again, there's an inherent paradox in our life that way, that we want to connect to something that's unfathomable, so we can't connect to it. We want to connect to what's impossible to connect to. That's actually what that yearning is. I mean, the deepest yearning within our soul is the will to connect to something that's ex machina, that's outside of our fathomable existence. So again, we might have like a hypothetical sense that there must be something beyond our fathoming, but again, it's not something that we can fathom. So we inherently have a paradoxical yearning that we want to connect to something. So again, connecting in a sense is fathoming, like understanding something, catching it, grasping it. Any connection in a way is encapsulating something. But when you want to connect, when and every one of us has this yearning to connect to something that's unfathomable. So you're actually trying to encapsulate that which is incapsulable. And therefore there is an inherent impossibility there. And somewhere, again, no, this might not be extremely articulated to everyone, but every one of us feels our deepest yearning to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu this way, that we're actually trying to jump to a mountain that's not achievable. But by definition, if it were achievable, it's not what we wanted. So again, wanting to connect to one's source, to one's creator, is by definition the will to connect to something that is outside of one's ability to connect to. And if it were fathomable, then it wouldn't be what I was looking for. So there's this inherent paradox in what we're yearning for. Now, that being the case, so what are all of the mitzvot? All of the Torah and mitzvot, all of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's commandments are like Hashem turning to us and giving us a fathomable foothold. So every mitzvah is something that we can fathom. Every commandment is something that we can, in a sense, relate to. We can, first of all, we can practice it, and also we can maybe understand it, relate to it, like don't kill, respect thy parents, and so on and so forth. Every mitzvah, some more and some less, are also something that we can practice practically, and also we can relate to it. We can associate with it emotionally, and we can relate to it cognitively. It makes sense to us. And by Hashem willing this, by Hashem concentrating himself, or his willingness to turn to us in our playground, again, in the terms of our logic, which he's created. So he's entering our world. So what was unfathomable becomes fathomable. But when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so on the one hand, again, all the mitzvot are like bridges between our creator and us. So I couldn't just turn to him because he's outside of my reach. But he turns to me. And what does it mean that he turns to me? Him turning to me, Hashem turning to us, is what he wants something of us within our fathomable realm. And that Hashem appears to me in a way that I can fathom. That now I can do this mitzvah. I can take a lulav on Sukkot. I can light Shabbos candle. I can put on tefillin. There are also things I can also practice, and I can also study and contemplate on and relate to. And by doing so, I can funnel also my emotions, also my understandings. I can funnel all of my personality to a relationship with my Creator, which again was completely out of reach for me before he turned to me with the mitzvot. So on the one hand, the mitzvot, they enable the unfathomable to be fathomable. But on the other hand, there's also a downside to that. What's the downside? The downside is that this is the reason that the mitzvot also don't soothe the core of our yearning. Because like we said before, our yearning in its essence is yearning to catch Hashem as something unfathomable. So on the one hand, the mitzvot give us an opportunity. Hashem contracts himself in a sense that I can relate to him. But on the other hand, I'm not really relating to him. I feel that by fathoming this connection, I'm losing the truth, like the abstract truth of who Hashem is. And my deepest yearning is that yearn to catch Hashem as he is in of himself. So that's why every person also has a feeling, just like the mitzvot, all of these commandments, just like there are opportunities to relate to Hashem and to funnel all my personality towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's also something restricting about the mitzvot. There's something contraction about the mitzvot. There's also, again, like any funnel, it's also guiding you, but it's also limiting you, burying you. So that's because our sheer core will it's not a picture. It's not a will to serve or to practice in any way. It's just a will to give ourselves over to something that's beyond our fathomable senses. So even though the mitzvot, they bridge that gap, they also lose the authenticity of the core of our will. And this is what the Ishbitzer says about mitzvot paraduma. The paraduma, because it's so unfathomable, even in its tangible practice, even the way it's articulated to us by Hashem's will, it maintains, it's like the archetype mitzvah that maintains its unfathomable sense. It really is just what Hashem wants. It's Hashem's sheer will. And even though it's something we can practice, given to us, and describes His will to us in order for it to be something we can catch. But even in its description, in its appearance in this world, it remains unfathomable. And by doing so, by being this type of mitzvah, it reveals also in of itself, it becomes the archetype of an unfathomable mitzvah. But also it reveals the true nature of all of the mitzvot. That really all of the mitzvot in their core are something unfathomable. It's just Hashem wanting something. But again, He wants it towards us. So He kind of garments Himself, or again, just like you speak to another person or to a child, let's say, it doesn't matter to anyone, then you make an attempt to step into His shoes, to walk into His world, to relate with Him. But really, it's you. It's the same you. But once you've contracted yourself into that image, so He only catches you within the image. So the red heifer, the paraduma, is a mitzvah where Hashem steps into our world, but also reveals to us that what's stepping in here is His unfathomable sense, His unfathomable self. Now, this mitzvah is an archetype that reveals that all the mitzvot that are that way, that even the mitzvot that make perfect sense to us, like I don't know, don't murder, don't steal. Still, when Hashem commands them, then the sensibility is just a garment which His will is encompassed within. But really His will is unfathomable. We're able to catch the unfathomable, to fathom the unfathomable within all the mitzvot. And where this is explicit and revealed is in the red heifer. And this is how He explains, like, the main word He wants to say. This is why this mitzvah is called Chukat Torah. Why does the Torah describe this mitzvah as the archetype ruling of all of the mitzvot? Because in this mitzvah of the red heifer, because of its apparent unfathomable nature, it reveals the true nature, the core of all of the mitzvot. That all of the mitzvot are really unfathomable. They're just being related and articulated to us in a fathomable manner so that we can channel all of ourselves into it. But really the core of what they are, the heart of every mitzvah, is just Hashem's sheer will. And the more we expose, in his Torah this week, the Ishbitzer explains that when Mashiach comes, like the higher messianic awareness that we're aspiring to, so this becomes more and more revealed. And very often when we practice Torah and mitzvot, so we can be so caught up with the fathomable part, like the articulating it, making sense of it, and again relating to it emotionally, identifying with the mitzvot, how good they are, how sensible they are, how plentiful they are and beneficial they are. But we can be so caught up with that part that we forget that they're also and mainly just the sheer will of Hashem. And when the more we connect to that part, the more we'll feel that the mitzvahs are soothing our sheer will to connect to Hashem. And the more we enhance the meddling with the mitzvah's sensibility, so we get some of that, the debris, is that feeling that they're also contracting us. So not that it's a bad thing to relate to the mitzvot, but we need to always maintain the heart of every mitzvah, which is where it's like the red heifer, it's like the paraduma. That really is just a paradoxical will of Hashem. So even those sensible things, like don't murder, so you always have to maintain the sense that as much as it makes sense, it's not really pure logic. It's just Hashem wants this, and it's as illogical in the core. His will for this, Hashem wanting something of us, is as illogical as it is in the red heifer. And the more you expose this part of every mitzvah, the more you feel that every mitzvah is relating to that part of you, which is yearning for a connection with that which is unobtainable. So once you reveal that part of every mitzvah, then it's exposed how the red heifer, the paraduma, is really the grand rule of all of the Torah. And this is what the Torah explicitly says in the beginning of this parasha, that this mitzvah, the archetype of a non-tangible mitzvah, is actually the chukah, the ruling, the constitution that constitutes all of the Torah mitzvot. So zot chukat Torah. The paraduma is the example for the entire Torah. All the Torah is that which is unfathomable, fathomabilizing itself. And when we catch into it, we need to make sure to maintain the sense of the unfathomable core, which is embedded within the logical and sensible garmenting of the mitzvot. And then they remain vivid, they remain alive, all of the mitzvot. And that labadikness, that the heart, penetrates also our logic, also our emotion. But instead of feeling that it's contracting us, we can feel that all of our service and connection to Hashem is connecting to that unfathomable God that we're yearning to connect to. So that's the word on this parasha, B'ezrat Hashem. We should all have very, very strong and powerful mitzvot this week by contemplating how the most mundane things we do in the service of Hashem, they're all encompassing the unfathomable God that we're yearning to connect to. B'ezrat Hashem, Shavua Tov.